Hey, it's Marie Forleo, and you are watching MarieTV, the place to be to create a business and life you love. And one of the most important components to be able to do that is your health. My guest today is a world-renowned expert and fierce advocate in the fight to transform our healthcare. And he's here to show us how to take back control of our energy, our focus, and our lives. Dr. Mark Hyman believes that we all deserve a life of vitality and that we have the potential to create it for ourselves. That's why he's dedicated to tackling the root causes of chronic disease by harnessing the power of functional medicine to transform healthcare. He's a practicing family physician, a 10-time #1 New York Times bestselling author, and an internationally recognized leader, educator, and advocate in his field. He's the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and also the founder and medical director of the Ultra Wellness Center. Mark is the chairman of the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine, a medical editor of the Huffington Post, and has been a regular medical contributor on many television shows, including CBS This Morning, The Today Show, and CNN. Mark also plays a substantial role in the phenomenal documentary released in 2014 called Fed Up, which addresses childhood obesity. Mark Hyman, thank you so much. We're finally doing this.
We are.
We've been wanting to do it forever.
Great to be here.
So let's start off with your story, because I know 20 years ago you got quite sick, and it had a profound impact on who you are and your work. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think anybody who's sort of had a life-changing experience, there's always something that shifts them that changes their life. And I had that. I was vigorous, healthy, riding my bike 100 miles a day. You could see 30 patients, remember everybody without any notes, and dictate everything at the end of the day and get it all right, to the next day not being able to walk up the stairs, not knowing where I was at the end of a sentence from where I started, and felt like I had depression, dementia, ADD all at once. I couldn't focus. I couldn't remember anything. I felt horrible. I couldn't sleep. My muscles ached. My digestion completely went kaflooey. My whole system broke down. I developed autoimmune issues. I developed rashes. I had sores on my tongue. I literally went from being a running 5 miles a day yoga, teacher before I was a doctor, to basically having this total body breakdown. And it was through the process of sort of uncovering that I sort of found that there was a whole new way to think about health and disease that was really about the root causes, about thinking of the body as a whole system, not just a bunch of different organs. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor. There's a doctor for every different part of your body. And instead of having a doctor for the whole organism, we have doctors for organs. So I needed to really look at that. And I found that I was able to actually understand how the body worked as a whole system, not just the symptoms. And that's when I discovered functional medicine. And I realized there was a whole way of thinking that was completely different than what I learned in medical school, that put all the pieces together, that connected the dots, that helped me figure out, why I was sick and what was going on. And it turned out I had mercury poisoning from living in China. And I had picked up some bug in some lake in Maine, and my gut kind of went crazy. And those two things completely shifted my whole biology, and it got stuck, and I couldn't get unstuck. And it was through understanding how to create health rather than treat disease that I was able to actually fix myself. So functional medicine is essentially the science of creating health. And it's very powerful, and it's the future of healthcare. That's why I'm at Cleveland Clinic now, because the CEO of Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the #1 healthcare centers in the world, has said, this is the future. We should be doing this, and we're going to invest in this. And they're investing big. I mean, we're building a $6 million brand new 18,000 square foot center. We've got 2,000 people on the waiting list. We're growing and growing. And I think we can't grow fast enough because people get it. People get that the way we are treating disease doesn't work. We can't just be covering over symptoms with medications. We have to understand the body as a biological system and ecosystem.
Yes.
And that was really the sort of shift that happened for me. And it led to me having to literally unwind my own health, get healthy. And then it's really compelled me to do everything I'm doing, because I realized, wait a minute, there's so many people who are suffering that don't need to suffer. Like a friend of mine sent me an email of this woman who's been suffering, who's her neighbor, and she gave me her list of symptoms and her whole story. And I looked at it in 3 seconds. I know what's going on. And it's not because I'm a genius. It's because I know the right lens to look at the problem with.
Yes.
It's like, once you understand how to solve a problem, it's not that hard, right?
Right.
So yeah, for Einstein to figure out E = mc², That was a lot of figuring, but once you got figured it out, it's easy, right? So I think that's the whole beauty of functional medicine. It's sort of like the what are the laws of biology, right? How is the human organism constructed? It's like, how are we this amazing magical system, and how does it actually work? Like, what are the laws of nature? And in medicine, we don't really have any theories. We just have a bunch of concepts of disease based on organs and symptoms, not based on causes and mechanisms. Sort of like by geography, where is it? And like by symptom, what's the symptom? Instead of like by the cause and the underlying mechanism. So functional medicine is that. It's like medicine by cause, not by symptom. And it's so powerful. And I see, so many people who actually don't get the solutions that they actually can get when they don't understand this model.
It's so frustrating and inspiring at the same time. I mean, your work has impacted me personally. I've gone through so many of your books. I've changed how I eat thanks to you and thanks to some other friends, our mutual friend, Chris Carr.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting because I feel like we have an opportunity to just transform not only healthcare, but how people live on a day-to-day basis and our longevity and how we feel and how we perform.
Yeah.
I know there was another big pivotal shift in your life that came from a trip to Haiti.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So, I spent like almost 20 years studying biological networks, like genetics, biochemistry, physiology, like how our molecules work, right? And it was amazing. It's like an amazing magical mystery tour. And I was treating people one-on-one and focused on doing that. And then Haiti happened, the earthquake in January 2010. And just before the earthquake happened, I was given a book by a friend of mine. I was given a book by a patient who was referred by a friend of mine who's a shaman. And he's like, you have to read this. And I'm like, okay. So I took a vacation. I was actually in Machu Picchu, and I read this book. It profoundly impacted me. It's called Mountains Beyond Mountains, about Paul Farmer, who went to Haiti after medical school and showed that you could cure TB and AIDS in the poorest country in the world. I mean, in the Western Hemisphere, one of the poorest countries in the world, not by better drugs or surgery, but by using the power of each other. He called it accompaniment, that people accompany each other to health. So he got community health workers trained, who were their neighbors, basically, to help their friends, their family members, their neighbors to get healthy by taking their medication on time, by getting clean water, just basic stuff. And he talked about this idea of structural violence. What are the social, economic, and political conditions that drive disease? That these are social problems. They're not medical problems so much, right? And I began to sort of reflect, and I began to, then I began to reflect on this. I was like, well, I really want to meet Paul Farmer. And then, of course, the earthquake happened, and a set of circumstances happened where I was like, well, I'm a doctor, and I was married to a doctor at the time who was a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and I'm like, well, we need to go, but we had no way to get there. So one of my patients who owns a jet texted me and says, do you want to go to Haiti? And I'm like, yeah, actually, we were just talking about that. So we got a whole team together, and I got a hold of Paul Farmer, and I said, do you want to come with us? Because nobody could get down there. So he jumped on the plane with us, and I got to know him, and it all kind of unfolded, and we got there. It was the worst thing you can imagine, Marie. I mean, it was the worst disaster, I think, that you can. There's like 300,000 people dead, 300,000 people injured, and they were just everywhere. And we got to the hospital, and it was a disaster zone, and we got to work, rolled up our sleeves. And then I got to know Paul during that process, and I got to see what was going on. And I asked the head of the hospital after the first week. We were sitting down, we ate some chicken. It was like these really skinny chickens in Haiti. They don't like have these big, hormone pump chickens. And I said, so before the earthquake, like, what was the most common admitting diagnosis here? And he's like, I thought he was going to say TB or AIDS, malaria. He's like, it was heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. I'm like, wow. And I realized that, chronic disease is everywhere. And then it was sort of that moment I had the insight that chronic disease is also a social disease. They call it non-communicable disease, but it's actually communicable. And it then began to kind of occur to me that the social drivers are not just affecting things like TB and AIDS, but obesity and heart disease and diabetes and cancer because of our food system, because of the environmental toxins we have, because of the social disintegration and all the issues that drive bad behavior. I mean, if you can't find a grocery store in your town that sells vegetables and there's only bodegas in every corner that sell processed food, well, how are you going to eat healthy? So there's really structural issues in our food policies and in our environmental systems and our agricultural systems that are driving so much disease. And I was like, we have to deal with this. And then I began to look at research when I got back, about like Christakis from Harvard talked about how you're more likely to be overweight if your friends are overweight than if your family's overweight. Like you're, I think, 170% more likely to be overweight if your best friend's overweight, but only like 40% more if your parents are overweight.
Wow.
So, and if your friend's friend who you don't even know is overweight, you're more likely to be overweight because of these social connections that are mapped out.
I mean, it makes sense because I know this just anecdotally, right?
Yeah.
You go out with your friends, you go to a party, one person orders something naughty, quote unquote.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it is
Right.
a chain reaction.
Totally.
Like the drinking takes over, this takes over, and then it's a couple days and you're in.
Exactly. It happens to me all the time. I go to dinner with people. They're like, oh, we're having dinner with Mark Hyman. I'm like, and then they're like, dessert menu comes. Like nobody orders dessert. And like, I don't care if people have dessert. Like they can have dessert. I don't care. I'm not like this food, please. Right. But like people have this internal process of like the peer pressure.
Yeah.
So the peer pressure can work for bad or it can work for good. So all this was happening and I began to think like, how do I do this?
Okay, so you've got functional medicine, right? You're aware of that. You're aware of all of these issues. And so what happens next that allows you to then start to take these insights and deploy them?
Yeah, so I was sort of chewing on all this and stewing in it and realizing that, we need to use our social threads and connections, our social networks to heal us by changing our behavior. And I was like, this is the future of healthcare. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? Like I'm just a single doctor doing this. So
I'm just Mark Hyman.
Yeah, well, and I was sitting in my office one day and Rick Warren walked in my office, who's a pastor at Saddleback Church in Southern California. And he's wrote this book called The Purpose-Driven Life, which sold more books than anything except the Bible nonfiction.
Amazing.
And he's like, I want to get healthy. I'm like, okay. So we did his checkup and working with him. And I said, why don't we have dinner after? So he's like, okay. So we had dinner at this little restaurant in town. And I said, tell me about your church, because I don't know much about what you do. So he said, well, I have 30,000 people in the church. I'm like, wow, that's a big church. He's like, yeah, we have 5,000 small groups to meet every week. And I'm like, wow, this is not a mega church. It's thousands of mini churches. He said, yeah, we meet to help each other live better lives. I'm like, it was like the light bulb moment. I was like, why don't we, Rick, take a healthy living program and put it through the small groups in your church? He's like, great idea. Because I was baptizing my church last week and I realized we're a fat church and I'm fat and we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
So we launched this thing. We thought a few hundred people would show up and we created a 6-week program called the Daniel Plan, after Daniel from the Bible who resisted the king's temptation of rich food. And 15,000 people signed up the first week. We had 15,000 people show up. We had to turn 2,000 people away. It was the biggest thing they'd ever had at the church, more than the 9/11 service, Obama-McCain debates. It was like huge. And people were just hungry. And these people were eating big gulps and having ice cream socials and pancake breakfast. The men would have rib breakfast to get the men to the church. I mean, it was bad. And, it's like, I said, you guys are trying to get your people to heaven early here with all this food. It's like, so we launched this program. We thought, we didn't know what was going to happen. And people were into it and they helped each other. They support each other. They held each other accountable. They shopped together. They exercised together. They cooked together. They learned together. And it was a secret sauce. It's like friend power, not willpower, right?
That is awesome.
Friend power is so much more powerful than willpower. And
amen to that.
Rick says everybody needs a buddy, right? And then I kind of in the process of it, I realized that getting healthy is a team sport. Like we can't just do it on our own. And you can if you're super strong-willed and you want to do it, but it's very hard. So in the first 10 months, the congregation lost 250,000 pounds. Wow. People reversed all sorts of diseases. It was written up in Time magazine. And, we ended up writing a book called The Daniel Plan. I wanted to call it The Jewish Doctor's Guide for Christian Wellness. But that didn't work out.
I love it. He's like, no. It's the Daniel Plan.
Yeah. And then we ended up winning the Christian Book of the Year award.
That is
which
awesome.
Is amazing. I'm the only Jude, I think, ever win the Christian Book of the Year award. Well, there's that one other guy. I don't know,
Well done. That's incredible. So did that bolster you? Were you like, this works?
So this is like, oh, this is it. So I realized that to get healthy bodies, we need to use the power of functional medicine to optimize biological networks. And we use the power of social networks to change behavior and the environment. Because so much of our health is environmentally determined.
Yes.
In the social networks. I mean, I read a study where if you take people from a very low income neighborhood to a slightly better neighborhood, just change the zip code, they lose weight, their diabetes gets better without doing anything else. So that social context is the biggest driver. Now in Cleveland, we're launching this in about a dozen churches. We're doing this in hundreds of churches around the world. And it's become a model for how we do this. And we need to do it in a secular basis. And that's some of the things we're doing at Cleveland Clinic, which is so exciting. We're working on changing healthcare because the incentives are changing now.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of getting paid for piecework, like in other words, the more colonoscopies or surgeries you do, the more money you make, now healthcare systems are getting paid for results, which is how healthy are your people. And if you can design a system to create health, you'll actually make more money, which is not how it is now.
Absolutely not how it is now.
So it's like the perfect storm of functional medicine, this insight around social networks with Cleveland Clinic in the changing healthcare phase where everything is coming together and we're innovating in ways that no one's ever imagined. So it's pretty exciting.
It's super exciting stuff. And, I get frustrated so often, even if I'm trying to deal with my own insurance and trying to get tests and cholesterol. And we've talked about that. Right. And I am just so thankful for the work that you're doing. One thing that you've shared is you said that we need to reimagine food as information.
Yeah.
So, what exactly does that mean?
So, we talked about functional medicine and this concept of systems and biological networks. And the biggest single input that you have every day into your health by far is what you eat. And it's not because food is just calories. Food is far more than calories. It's information. It's literally instructions that with every bite changes your biology. So it alters your gene expression. 20,000, 30,000 genes are all transformed, good or bad, depending on what you eat. It can turn on the fat genes or the skinny genes. It can turn on the health genes or the disease genes, right? It controls your immune system, turns on inflammation, turns off inflammation, depending on what you eat. If you eat trans fat, it turns on inflammation. If you eat omega-3 fats, it turns off inflammation. Calorie for calorie is actually acting very differently in your body. If you eat calories that are high in sugar and starch, you're going to slow your metabolism. If you eat calories that are higher in fat, you're going to speed up your metabolism, independent of the calories. So I think it's really important to understand that food is not just calories, it's information, and it affects your hormones, like your insulin, your thyroid, your blood sugar, your sex hormones, your adrenal hormones. All those things are regulated by what you're eating. And then even your gut. We all are talking about the microbiome, this whole sea of bacteria that live in your gut. There's like 10 times as many bacterial cells as your own cells. There's 100 times as much bacterial DNA as your own DNA. About 20,000 genes. You have about 2 million bacterial genes. And they're all doing stuff. And you're controlling that population with literally every bite of food you take. It doesn't change over time. It changes literally minute by minute. So by transforming food, you can upgrade your biological software literally within days.
This is what I wanted to get into because I feel like for so many people who are struggling right now with their health or they feel overweight or they just don't even feel healthy. They're lethargic, they're tired, they're having skin issues, they're having inability to focus and concentrate.
You know what I call that?
What?
I call it FLC syndrome.
What does that mean?
When you feel like crap.
Yes. And I mean, I've been, over the past couple of years, I've been paying more and more attention to being aware of how I feel immediately after I eat certain things. And I'm Italian, so this kind of kills me. But I realized that having a lot of dairy, it's not good for mama at all. Yeah. And it's just so exciting. But one of the things I love that you say is that most people don't realize how close they are to good health. I feel like, tell us about that.
I mean, I always say people don't realize how close they are to health and happiness. They don't. And I mean, so many of my patients said, God, Dr. Hyman, I didn't realize I was feeling so bad until I started feeling so good. And it didn't take that long. Yes. So, I mean, I've written a lot of books, but one of the ones I wrote, they're all based on functional medicine principles. They're not like something I just invented out of the air that I concocted to try to sell a book. They're really to tell the story of how to empower yourself with the tools you need to take back your health. Because a lot of the stuff I'm saying can be done without a doctor. When we were at Saddleback Church, there was me and Dr. Hyman and Dr. Oz helped a little bit, but basically it was a couple of doctors to 15,000 people.
Yes.
Right? And we didn't treat each one individually, but their migraines went away, their asthma went away, their irritable bowel went away. They had improvement in their autoimmune conditions, their diabetes went away, they got off insulin. I mean, just all these things happen as a result of having the right inputs, taking out the bad stuff, putting in the good stuff. And so, when you understand how the body works and you take out the bad stuff and you put in the good stuff, and most of that stuff we have control over, it's not stuff you need a doctor for, you can transform your health so fast. And that's why I wrote the 10-day detox diet, because it's in 10 days, people can get a hit of actually their baseline of what their new baseline is.
Yes.
Now, if they have something serious like Lyme disease or mercury poisoning, or I ate turkey and brown rice and like broccoli for months, and I never got better because I had mercury poisoning, right? So there are things you need a doctor for, but most of the people walking around suffering from things are related to leaky gut, to inflammation, to food sensitivities, to all sorts of sugar in the diet and processed foods and chemicals. And when you take all that out, the body just wants to be healthy.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
We'll talk more about 10-day detox because I did that one at the end. But I want to go now to I loved you and everyone in Fed Up.
Yeah.
That documentary was so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that one of the biggest resistant points that people have to changing how they eat is they feel like one of the things it's so expensive. So can you talk to us about that family that you were able to work with in South Carolina?
Well, the Fed Up was an amazing movie on so many levels because it really addressed the issue of sugar and sugar addiction. So I was an advisor in the movie, and that's actually why I wrote the 10-Day Detox, was to address this issue of the addictive power of sugar and starch. And it's not just like an addictive substance. It actually is biologically addictive, well proven by science. It lights up the areas in the brain that cocaine or heroin does, and it's serious. So in this movie, we tried to highlight that, and we saw so many people struggling with losing weight because they were biologically addicted to foods. It was like trying to sort of swim upstream without actually knowing why you weren't getting anywhere, right? And one of the families was Brady and his mom, Tina, and I went down and worked with them in South Carolina, in Easley, South Carolina. And, I think I had a judgment that I didn't realize I had about why people didn't change. I thought, well, they knew, like they just know what to do. They're just not doing it, right? There may be social pressures, but it's not a knowledge problem. Like people know that soda is not good for you. Like people know that, Cool Whip isn't good for you.
Right.
Like people know that. And I realized that, when I went down there and talked to them, I said, well, because, the father was on dialysis at 42. The son was like 16 and practically diabetic. The mother was well over 100 plus pounds overweight and had all sorts of medical issues. They lived in a trailer. There was 5 of them. They had disability and food stamps. And, they were struggling and with their health. And I said, why do you want to change? And they all started crying because the father had to lose 40 pounds in order to get a kidney transplant, and he couldn't do it. And he didn't know what to do. And they were desperate to do the right thing. And that's why they were part of the movie, and they were trying to figure it out. And Brady wanted to go to medical school, and, they wanted to figure it out. And so rather than like just tell them what to do, I said, why don't we cook a meal together? So we went and got groceries. I went and got groceries. And I got this little guide called Good Food on a Tight Budget, which is how to eat food that's good for you, good for the planet, and good for your wallet, which is from the Environmental Working Group where I'm on the board. And I said, why don't we just cook together? Like, let's just make it fun. And when we got in there, I realized, let's look in your kitchen first and see what's there. They had no food. Like they had food-like substances. There were Pop-Tarts, and there was Cool Whip, and there was, low-fat salad dressing, and there was, if you covered the front of the box and you looked at the ingredient list, you couldn't tell what it was. Like there were 47 different ingredients, and everything had the same ingredients. Flour, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, all kinds of weird corn byproducts like maltodextrin, trans fats, MSG. These are like the staples of processed food. And they all cause addiction. They cause brain dysfunction. They cause fatigue. They cause cravings. They are designed to do that. The food industry designs these foods on purpose to do that. Michael Moss wrote about it in his book, Salt, Sugar, and Fat. It's very powerful. And so I said, that Cool Whip is mostly trans fat. And they're like, no, because it says 0 trans fat on the nutrition facts label. And I'm like, yeah, that's right, because the FDA is in cahoots with the food industry, and the food industry got them to say if it has less than half a gram per serving, they can say 0 on the label. So it's basically all trans fat and high fructose corn syrup and water. And we went over everything, and they were just sort of shocked. And I said, well, let's cook a meal. And they didn't have a cutting board. They didn't have knives. We're trying to cut sweet potatoes to roast them. And we had to use like a butter knife on a plate. They never stir-fried a vegetable. They never eat vegetables except for canned string beans. And, they had iceberg lettuce with store-bought salad dressing that was mostly sugar and soybean oil, which is very inflammatory. And I said, it's so simple. Here's how you cut vegetables. Here's how you stir fry. Here's how you make turkey chili. We made a salad. We made olive oil and vinegar dressing, salt and pepper, nothing fancy, cheap, really, from this guide. And they were like, this is so good. And they like loved it. And then Brady, the son, was like, can you eat like this with your family every night? And I'm like, yeah, every night. It's not, and it's fun. You do it together. It's delicious. It's enjoyable. And they lived on $1,000 a month for food for all of them, with food stamps, and that was it, and disability. Yeah. And they would go out to eat at Denny's and all these places. A lot of times they'd eat this horrible food, and they were able to do this on food stamps and disability because they realized that what the food industry was telling us was wrong. Food, it's not inconvenient. It's actually probably more easy and convenient to cook stuff yourself. It doesn't take that long. It's not more expensive. You can do it for less. Yeah, you don't have to have like $70 grass-fed prime rib.
No.
But you can get, cheaper cuts of meat, cheaper vegetables, cheaper fruits. You can do it. It's possible, eating real food. And that, this whole idea that it's just inconvenient, expensive, and difficult is the food industry's way of sort of hijacking the kitchen. So the food industry essentially hijacked the American kitchen. And there's all these subtle messages. You deserve a break today. Leave the cooking to us, right? It's like this whole
dark side of marketing.
Yeah, and I think now the amount of money spent eating out is far exceeding that from grocery stores.
Yeah.
So it was a powerful insight for me to realize that people can do it, and people didn't have the information that it's not difficult. That they were able to, once they knew some basic instructions. I mean, Americans spend more time cooking. I've been watching cooking on television than actually cooking, right? I mean, and we sort of made cooking a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But it actually is what we need to do to retake back our kitchens.
I think for anyone watching, if you have not seen Fed Up the movie, you have got to see it. It's incredible. Mark, before I let you go, you're a 10 times New York Times bestselling author. So for anyone who's like, oh my goodness, I'm excited, they want to get started, which of your books would you suggest if they're interested to get started with?
Depends what's going on with you. There's two that I think are powerful that sort of lay out the framework of functional medicine, and there's one that's sort of like a quick start. So the 10-day detox, if you just don't want to get into all the sciencey, geeky stuff, and you just want to like have a plan, if you follow it, you'll see what happens. I mean, it's 10 days, right?
Yes.
People can do anything for 10 days.
Yes.
If it doesn't work, you spent your time doing something that didn't work. If it did work, it'll change your life.
Yes.
Right? So that's a good place to start. If people really want to get into the science of functional medicine, the two books I recommend are The Ultramind Solution, which is about how our body affects our brain. So you can, meditate all you want, but if you're mercury poisoned, your brain's not going to be working properly, right? Or if your thyroid's not working, or if your gut flora is off. So it talks about how the body is connected to the brain. It's really a download around functional medicine, and things like depression, ADD, dementia, all those mood, focus, and cognitive disorders are profoundly affected by what's going on in our body.
Awesome.
Because our brains just not stick it there on top of our head. And then the blood sugar solution is really about this phenomena of insulin resistance, prediabetes, which affects 1 out of every 2 people. Like, why are we overweight in this country? There's a reason for it. And it has to do with this phenomena we call insulin resistance, which is like prediabetes, where when you eat sugar or starch, it raises insulin. That's a fat fertilizer. Stores belly fat, makes you hungry, slows your metabolism. So it's how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with all the drivers of that? So those 2 books I think are good.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much. Congratulations on everything that you're doing. You are honestly one of my heroes, and I'm so honored to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Mark and I would love to hear from you. What's the single biggest insight that you're taking away from this conversation today? Let us know in the comments below. Now, as always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at MarieForleo.com. So go there and leave a comment now. Once you're there, be sure to sign up for our email list and you'll become an MF Insider, which means that you'll get instant access to a very powerful audio training that I created. It's called How to Get Anything You Want. You'll also get some exclusive giveaways and some insights from me that I don't share anywhere else. Stay on your game and keep going for your dreams because the world needs that special gift that only you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time on MarieTV. B-School is coming up. Want in? For more info and free training, go to joinbschool.com.
People don't realize how close they are to health and happiness. They don't. And I mean, so many of my patients said, God, Dr. Hyman, I didn't realize I was feeling so bad until I started feeling so good. And it didn't take that long.